This is my Nano Aquarium. It's a UNS 5N and I set it up specially for my tiny little pea puffer and I'm absolutely in love. So today I'm going to tell you all about the ups and downs of this tank and what we can do to improve it, but stay tuned to the very end of the video because I'm going to give you my tips for maintaining a Nano Aquarium and keeping it relatively algae free. So I initially set this tank up back in late spring, and to be honest, it had a little bit of a rocky start. I typically deal with some pretty bad plant melt when I first set up a tank, and I'm still in the process of figuring out why. I do know that I have very low GH, very low KH water here in Portland, so it might have something to do with fluctuating pH in the aquarium. Anywho, that's for another video. Now things are looking quite decent in the tank, and the plants are really on the up and up. So this tank has undergone a couple trimmings, and I've done that to sort of remove any sort of leaves that were melted back or partially disintegrated and promote new, healthy, compact, bushy growth. So starting in the front, we have the carpet, which is Hemianthus calicotroides cuba, and it's doing quite decent right now. Most of the growth is looking really healthy, but to be honest, it should be very dense and spread out by now, and it just isn't. Again, I think that has something to do with fluctuating pH due to the low KH in this tank. Additionally, all the driftwood is going to further lower the pH, so I'm working to find a solution to that, but things seem to have stabilized and are spreading out. As we move over to the midground, we have some rheophytes attached to the driftwood. And in this case, I'm using the Anubias Nana Petite, an all-time classic, and it's doing really well. I didn't notice any sort of melting back of it. It's growing, there are new leaves, and it's looking really beautiful. Now, what I want to do is eventually add some more to the rear midground to provide more details and make the tank look a lot more lush. As of now, I'm sort of feeling that the driftwood looks really cool, but I want it to be covered in more plants. So moving on to the left and right sides of the tank, we have the Ultradenthera rhynicii mini, and despite a little bit of melting in the beginning, it's doing really well. I've trimmed it down, replanted it a couple times, and I'm in the process of spreading it out. I really like how the red sort of frames the tank nicely, and it contrasts really well in front of the Cryptocorini green gecko. I have that on the back left and the back right, and that had a really slow start, as most crypts do for me, but it's really taking off now. There are just some plants, especially from tissue culture, that take a while to get established, and I do find that crypts take a few months to really root and get established before their growth takes off. Now moving on to the mid background, we have the Rotala atra, and from most of the angles of this tank, you're not going to see it. That's because I've hacked it down and replanted it several times because I'm looking to promote more red color. The more you trim Rotala atra, the more red it will be, and with all stem plants, the more you trim them, the more dense, bushy, and compact they're going to come in. So I just did that this past weekend, so it's looking a little bare now, but I actually replanted the tips of it to sort of get that instant lush look. So I plan on doing a full video in the future about how to trim stem plants and replant the tops. It's a very popular method in the competition tank world, and all the pros tend to do this to keep their tanks looking really good. So full tutorial on that coming in the future. And finally, in the foreground, we have the Hydrocotyl verticillata, and this is a plant that sort of grows like a weed. Almost every week I'm trimming it down and sort of pruning it. Additionally, in a nano tank like this, it's sort of a larger texture, so I try and keep the growth really young and fresh so that the leaves don't get too large, because Hydrocotyl verticillata is one of the largest leafed hydrocotyls. So now it's time to talk about some tips I have for maintaining a nano aquarium, because they are a special case and there's far less room for error due to the much smaller volume of water. So the first tip I have for you is to filter using a large external filter. For this tank specifically, I'm filtering it with the OASE BioMaster Thermo 250. The advantage of using a large canister filter on a nano tank like this is that it provides a ton of space for beneficial bacteria, and it gives me an additional safety net with this really small volume of water. I can drain about 90% of the tank's water and still have about 50% volume left in the system because of how large the canister filter is. One additional challenge that I find I often encounter when dealing with nano tanks is they are at increased risk for algae due to that smaller tank volume, and generally they're a little bit closer to the light. So I do find that my lily pipes accumulate with grime and with green algae faster than my larger systems. So I am having to clean those more often compared to my other two tanks, which are quite a bit larger, but that's okay. Once you get in the habit of it and you get good at cleaning them with bleach, it's really not a problem. And my final tip for maintaining a little nano aquarium is to be especially careful about overstocking. Keep a really high plant load and keep a very low bio load. As you can see, I just have a little pea puffer in here, and she does not take up much space. She's a little bit of a messy eater, so that's something to consider. You know, there are some worms that get left over after feeding time, but I'm pretty on top of that. I'm doing water changes on this aquarium twice a week, so I really am very much on top of the maintenance. So those are my tips for maintaining a nano aquarium. Do me a favor, let me know down below in the comments what you think of this tank. It has a long way to go and it's far from its prime. So if you have any tips that you think would improve the tank, let me know. I love hearing from you guys. Thanks for watching. This has been Logan, and I'll catch you next time.